Okay, hello everyone. Welcome back to Concordia University's ForSpace. Thank you for joining us for the third panel today as part of the Indigenous Futures Research Center's annual research symposium. And we're streaming to YouTube. We are live from ForSpace, and we are located here on unceded Indigenous lands in Tiohtià:ke, Montreal. Our third panel to today, Weaving Culturally Grounded Visual Identities. And our moderator for this panel, who I'm happy to introduce, University Research Chair in Computational Media and Indigenous Future Imaginary, co-director of the IFRC, but also principal investigator of Abundant Intelligences, Jason Edward Lewis. Jason, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Doug, for introducing us. And Renee and Kimmy, it's really great to see your faces up there. I can't look at you and actually see you at the same time, so I might be kind of going back and forth. I can kind of see you in the reflection over there. But anyways, really lovely to have you join us. What I was going to do is start off with just kind of a short overview of Abundant Intelligences, and then introduce our fabulously talented designers who are going to then take us away in a presentation of some really amazing work that they've been doing over the last year and a half. So Abundant Intelligences is a large-scale international research project that is looking at how to integrate Indigenous knowledges and artificial intelligence. We're doing a number of different things within the project, but kind of at the heart is trying to answer, I think, kind of two main questions. So one question is there a way in which we can ethically bring together traditional knowledges and advanced computational systems like artificial intelligence, right? So as I imagine most people here in the room might know, there's sort of kind of continual problems with artificial intelligence, at least in the sort of the main way it's being practiced now, which is through these large language models and machine learning that are really kind of at the core, the way they've been developed, deeply, deeply unethical. They basically operate by stealing everybody's data and then using that to fuel the systems. And so this poses a problem, I think, for everybody, but in particular for Indigenous communities who have a long history of settler colonial powers coming in and extracting their knowledge, and not only using that knowledge for their own benefit, but then often sort of turning around and using that knowledge against us. And so there's a lot of concern with Indigenous communities that we work with about how is it possible actually to engage with these technologies in a way that's good for us. So a big part of the project is we feel that it is possible, that we just have to really sit down and work it out with our communities, what that might be like. But we also think that in doing that, we will actually help make AI better for everybody, help make AI that's actually more ethical in general. So the research project started in 2023. It's, like I said, it's international, so there's Indigenous communities from Canada, from United States, Hawaii, and Aotearoa at the moment. And we have 40 co-investigators and 6 different research clusters and lots of stuff. They might be talking about some of those numbers as well. And so it's been a really interesting challenge in many different dimensions, but one of the biggest challenges has been how do we create sort of a research endeavor that is able to function at an Indigenous level, meaning like pan community, because we all recognize that we have some common concerns, we have some common ways of looking at things, and we also want to work in solidarity with each other. So we need a certain amount of working together as a group of an Indigenous people, as well as non-Indigenous people who are part of the project too. But then we're also working with specific communities. So how do we honor the specificity of those communities, not in the research that we do, and in the sorts of solutions that we're looking for? And the project that we're going to look at today is, I'm really excited about it for a number of different reasons, but one of the big reasons is I think that the group of designers who are working on it really developed an amazing methodology to do those two things at once, to both reflect the research team as a whole and all its crazy international abundance, but also then reflect the specific communities that we're working with in our different research clusters. And so there's a really great sort of methodological component to this, which we think is something that we want to emulate across the entire research network. And they did this in the process of developing a visual identity for the project. So I think that's enough for now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce our panelists. So first, our panelists who are beaming in from Aotearoa. Renee Waiwiri is a Maori designer from Aotearoa, New Zealand. She affiliates to Gati Tara, Gati Naho, and Gati Hinaru. She holds a master's in user experience design and bachelor's in industrial design. Kimiora Whaanga, who is on the right there, is a Maori graphic designer as well, with affiliations to Puhi, Gata Kahungi, Vaitaha. You guys are gonna, don't hurt me. I know I'm not getting these quite right. Vaitaha, Gaitahu, and Gati Mamoa. She's a graphic designer at Indigenous Design and Innovation Aotearoa, and she has a bachelor's degree in visual communication design. And then here with us in the room, we have Tarcisio Cataldi, who is a Black Brazilian designer based here in Jojage, Montreal. He holds a bachelor's degree in graphic design and is a master's of design student here at Concordia. He's currently working as a studio designer in our research studio, Aboriginal Territories in Cyberspace. And then Julia Fortin is a white settler of French-Canadian descent, also based here. She holds a DCS in graphic design and a BA in art history, and is currently completing an MA in art history at Concordia as well. She is currently working also as a studio designer at Aboriginal Territories in Cyberspace. So I'm going to turn it over to them. They have been working together for quite a while now, and they have everything planned out for us.
Would you like me to start, Tarcisio? Oh, we're on.
His mic's, sorry.
Hi. Hello. Yes, yes, sorry, we were having technical problems here, but yes, please do it.
Oh, kia ora mai tātou, tēnā tātou katoa, ngā mihi nui o tēnei ata, o te rā ahiahi. Kia ora tātou katoa, ko wai tēnei, he uri tēnei no Ngāti Tara, no Ngāti Naho, no Ngāti Hineru hoki, I tupu ake au ki Taranaki, ko Renee Waiwiri tōku ingoa. Kia ora tātou, it's really nice to meet you all. Meet you, as they say. I am Renee Waiwiri. I am from Taranaki, Aotearoa. I am a Māori UX and graphic designer. I'm originally from IDEA, but I'm currently working in Taranaki. As Jason said, I did a bachelor's in industrial design at Victoria University and a master's in user experience design. I've been working with the Abundant team for about a year now, as Jason has said. And yeah, it's just really nice to see, meet you all. And I'll hand it over to Kimiora to have her introduction as well. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Renee. Tēnā tātou katoa nā pohi Ngāti Kahungunu nai tahu, Ngāti Mamoe Waitaha nā iwi. Kia ora. I am a Māori graphic designer as well, located in the whenua of Te Atiawa, Te Whanganui o Tara, so Wellington. I also was with IDEA, Indigenous Design and Innovation Aotearoa, but now I'm moving into a new chapter of my life, entering a Masters of Māori Visual Arts. And I studied a Bachelor's of Visual Communication Design in Wellington as well. So yeah, kia ora, and I will pass it over to Tarcisio.
Hello. Yeah, so as Jason already said, I am originally from Brazil. What in English we use, I'm an Afro-Brazilian. I've been living here for almost 3 years now. I'm doing my master's, I'm finishing, fingers crossed. And I've been working at the lab for almost 2 years now. And I remember to this day, when Jason came to me, like sort of like introducing this project, you're like, oh yeah, you're gonna be just like a facilitator. We have like a whole setup. And then we just like meet these people and it's gonna be fine. It's gonna be real quick, probably. And turns out like we spent like a year and something in this project, which was like one of the greatest projects I took on. And it's, I'm really privileged and grateful for that. In my design practice, I try to sort of work with a very simple concept which is intention. I'm very interested in design with intention. And I think that like drives everything that I do. And yeah, we're gonna talk a little bit more about the things that we did, but I'm gonna hand over to Julia.
Hi, mine is going to be very quick because I feel like my bio that Jason read kind of says everything. I'm of French-Canadian descent. It has been a really great project to work on. I've been working at the lab for about less than a year. I don't know when I started anymore, so it's hard to say. It feels like longer than it's been because this has been such a huge project. I've been based in Jojage, Montreal for about 7 years now. Oh yes, if Renee, you want to start the presentation?
Oh yeah.
Let's go.
Just go to the next slide as the introduction. Oh yeah, so this is a photo. So what we're going to talk about is some of the recent events that have happened during Abundant Intelligences, just to give you a bit of context around the program, around who was involved and where we were situated throughout the world. So this is a picture from our recent AGM in Aotearoa last November, where I believe it was about 60 to 70 people came to Aotearoa for about a week and a half. And we got to go to many prominent places within Aotearoa. So where we first started was Waitangi, and that is where Te Tiriti o Waitangi was signed. And we learned about Te Tiriti o Waitangi and also the Māori battalion that was in Waitangi. And then we also drove down to Kawea and we spent a few days in there with Tiriana Anderson's wānau, and we learned about Tainui, the Kingitanga. We also connected with a lot of Māori communities there and talking about AI and the benefits and also the consciousness that we have to consider when it comes to working with AI. And then we moved on to Whakatane, where we are here, which is Te Ware Wānanga o Awanui Ārangi. So this is one of our Māori tertiary education providers. It's 95% Māori. It's educating our Māori community in order to pursue the knowledge as best as they can. This is a really awesome kaupapa to be a part of and just to meet everyone there. You can see in the photo in the front, we've got Po Temara, which is one of our kaumātua on the team within Hiringa Te Mahara, but also Abundant Intelligences. And we also got to meet Sehirini Moko-Mead, which is one of the prominent authors and just knowledge holders within Aotearoa. And then we landed in Te Whanganui-a-Tara, Wellington, where we did a few days at Massey University, which Kimiora graduated from. See, that was just a little bit of context around the AGM that happened last year. You can see our faces there. That was actually the first time that Tarcisio, Julia, and Kimiora and I met them. And we'd been working for a year together. So it was just really awesome to meet everyone that we've been talking to for about a year and to connect and to share our culture with the rest of them. Okay, I'll go to the next slide now. So just giving a little bit of context around how many people are involved in the program. We've got people from Canada, we've got people from the United States, Hawaii, and Aotearoa. You can see there's a lot of collaborators, universities, students, community-based organizations, and the research pods that we're going to talk about a lot today. Would you like to go next? Awesome. So Tarcisio made this beautiful map to showcase where we are within the world. But yeah, it just gives you a little bit of context around where the different pods are located, because they are like on the borders as well. So this is really good for us to understand where they're located and just the reach that we're creating in order to connect with all these Indigenous communities. So it's been very rewarding. Okay, next. So yeah, here are the 5 pods that we've been working with for this visual identity. So we've got Ka Hawaii Paiaina pod, which is based in Hawaii. We've got the Nisapi pod. We've got Wihanwe Sa. We've got Haudenosaunee, and we've got Hiringa Te Mahara, which is based in Aotearoa. These little tiles that you see here, it definitely nods to the visual identity, but we'll talk more about that once we get into it. So we should go over the timeline, Tarcisio. Awesome. So yeah, as I said, it was 12 and maybe longer that we actually started, but we actually started at the first AGM in November 2023, where we talked about some of the brand guidelines or some of the principles and values that we wanted to create within ourselves, within our craft, in order to work authentically with Indigenous communities. Through December, through August, it was a lot of development, understanding what are we going to create, and then it went into presenting those creations with some of the development team, Jason, Johnson, and even some of the rest of the team within Canada. And we tested those within our respective studios in Aotearoa in Canada. And then we moved into the pod interviews. We had lots of engagements with each of the pod leaderships, as well as doing some quantitative research, such as surveys and things like that, to bring in the community voice as well. And I think, I guess throughout this journey as Indigenous designers from IDEA, we saw an opportunity to bring our culture-centered design framework to the forefront and sharing our approaches to how we engage with Māori for our team members overseas. But we did recognize that as Indigenous designers, we don't speak for all Indigenous communities, nor would we want to. So we wanted to ensure throughout the whole process that we wanted to create the space for Indigenous nations to share their own unique stories in their way and in their time. I think that was a big thing for us when it came to developing this. And I guess when it came to the process, there are a lot of things that we came up with. And just through the beauty of technology, we were able to collaborate on FigJam, online, do lots of Zoom calls. We were looking at ways that we could create a logo that's like dynamic, transformative, but also responsive to the various Indigenous worldviews, because there are just so many. And yeah, you can see here we explore things like generative AI, shape-shifting objects, or variative type. We have a lot of skill sets within the team, so we wanted to showcase that. We wanted to embrace that when it came to developing this quite massive brief that we had. But I think when it came to brainstorming a lot of the ideas, we were reflecting on the rich tradition of storytelling within Indigenous cultures. And as Māori, we started to think about rāranga, tukutuku, or kōwhaiwhai, which are visual records of our history. And they're passed down, basically, they're visual records that are passed down through history that talk about how we lived alongside the environment, how we embraced the environment, how we took care of the environment, and how we took care of each other. We lived in harmony with the land and we cared deeply about the environment. So I think when it came to looking at other weaving examples within other Indigenous communities, we saw things like quill work, beadwork, tapa, kapa. There's something very harmonious about all of us keeping record of our histories through these traditional practices within our Indigenous communities. So we wanted to bring that up. We wanted to bring that within the digital space so we can start to capture and also educate a lot of our Indigenous members about their history and provide visual cues to enable them to have conversations with their mokopuna, with their children about their history. So we did think, what if this visual identity One that's rooted in Indigenous history, celebrates our diverse ways of living alongside the environment. What if we could assist in the exchange of knowledge from generation to generation? What if we could embed our ancestral histories into our digital futures? So that's just basically just the development of how we got to the outcome that we have. But I'd love Tarcisio to talk more about the actual outcome of all of that.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that kind of like embraces what's the title of the panel here, which is weaving culturally grounded visual identities. And it's important to say that we did this in plural because the outcome of it was just not one logo, but it was 6, 5 up to this day, but 2 more will come. So it's a lot of things. Yeah, and like I think probably some people have seen that already, but that's what we call a global logo for abundant intelligences. As you can see, it is a modular tile design that together form like the abbreviation of AI. And that's the idea of like support the program to reimagine a new type of artificial intelligence, and the one that is indigenous led. All of these tiles, they replicate flora, fauna, lands, the skies, the waters, but also the relationship with technology that the program is embracing and improving. So it was one of the things, I think we're going to talk more about it, but it's the challenge for us was just like, how can we detach from the very Western approach of very straightforward, simple logos of like, yeah, let's do something like very minimalistic with a very clear message that people can get like right away. And how can we change that sort of perception and sort of interaction, and like really taking the time to see all of that, because in each AI logo that we did, there are 21 of these styles that we call. So we have like a bunch of them. It's 105 in total. So we like the development of it was just like, how can we make this abundant, right? So that you can see from the logo itself, from the color palette, which is in the next slide. We draw inspiration from like a bunch of different things, from the yellows and oranges, the like kind of like talk about the day, the blues that talk about the night, and the purple too, the greens from nature, and the sort of green on the bottom. It's kind of like a techie vibe to it, and that was our thing. Like that was the thing that we wanted to enhance in the logo, like the feelings of vitality, the feelings of abundance, and also we wanted to reflect that in the typography decisions, which we came across to this one. It's this sharp-edged custom typeface that we sort of like tried different things over and over, and we felt that this one, both visually and sort of like the narrative of it, was something that it was really important for us. So this typography is inspired by Du Bois' work. He was an American sociologist, historian, and civil rights activist, and it's based on his work on data visualization. I would like to like talk a lot about this, but for the sake of just the time, I'm going to keep it short. But if you're really interested, please search for it, because it's a great project. And yeah, this is just one of the many versions of the logo, because we sort of created the space for Indigenous communities to incorporate their own tiles into the global branding. So that's kind of like a breakdown of each one of the tiles. You can take photos to kind of like see it later, maybe if you want, but all of them So in the global logo, there's like 1 or 2 or 3 of tiles from each pod. So it was sort of like a tapestry of the whole program and the communities that are involved in it. And then our mission was like to have a sub brand for every pod that joined and will join the program. And these tiles, they create, they tell their stories and showcase the elements that have sustained them for generations. And yeah, now I'm gonna hand over to Julia to talk a little bit more about the pod designs.
Thank you. Sorry. So I'm just gonna talk about the process of creating the pod design. So as Tarcisio mentioned, there's not just one logo involved in this project. There's currently 5 logos, and there's a 6th one that's gonna come soon. So there are 4 pod logos to this date. So we started the process of creating these 4 logos by sharing the concept behind the global logo, which each pod. So we wanted to get an understanding of whether they saw this concept as a positive mechanism to celebrate their stories. It was really important for us to receive approval from each of the pod because we understood first how meaningful their stories are, and also because we wanted to create logos with them and not just for them. And so one of the pivotal steps in the process of creating the pod logos was the initial conversations that we had with each of the pods. And during these conversations, members of the pod share symbols, stories, and resources from their communities with us. And informed by these conversations, we performed, as Renee mentioned, qualitative research to ensure that we capture the voices of the pod leadership and the Indigenous community members that are involved. And through these different discussions, what we wanted was really to build trust and transparency so that they could lead us actually to the final design. So it was a huge also practice of listening that was involved in it. And I think I do speak a little bit for all of us when I say that we felt quite privileged to even just be a part of these conversations, because it was quite amazing how all the pods and all the community members involved that we talked to really trusted us and shared their stories with us. And then in that sense, after that, we became also kind of holder of these stories, and we had to find a way to represent them as best as we could. So we feel quite grateful for that. And the fact that they trusted us as well to create these designs, especially as people who, for some, are not part of these communities. And then so you see here on this slide some of the ideation and the drafts. The image that's yellow in the bottom, that's just a glimpse of our very, very big, yes, thank you, Tarcisio, very, very big Figma boards that we have where we did ideation. So from these discussions that we had, the initial discussions with the pods, we held ideation workshops with just the 4 of us, where we pulled together all the resources and imagery that was provided from each pod, and we started to identify tiles that we could design. And these tiles were specifically placed within this AI shape of the logo to sit according to the stories in the atmosphere that's specific to each pod. And we shared our progress with pod leadership, so there was a bit of a back and forth process that went on so that we could gain an understanding and hopefully endorsement from each pod, recognizing that consent is collective. And we invited representatives to share with their communities before providing feedback, which allowed us to incorporate these insights into the revised design and ensure that the tiles really reflect each community's traditional knowledge. So there was quite a long back and forth process, which is also why this design took quite a long time to make, because we wanted to integrate the feedback from all the different people involved into the final designs. And I'm just going to start off by talking a little bit about the Haudenosaunee pod logo, and then after that, I'm going to let Kimiora talk about the rest of the pod designs. So the Haudenosaunee pod logo is inspired by the Haudenosaunee creation story, which I'm not going to tell because that's not my place and we don't have the time, but just to give you kind of an idea, it's how Sky Woman fell from Sky World through a hole left beneath the uprooted celestial tree. And she descended to Earth, which was then covered in water. And a flock of birds helped her land peacefully on the back of a turtle, and that turtle became Turtle Island. So when you look more closely at the design, you can see that we tried to incorporate some elements from that story inside of it, and also in the way that we placed the different tiles together. So when you look at the eye in particular, so we have on top the celestial tree, and then the sky dome that represents Sky World, and then you have the turtle at the bottom of it. And the wampum figure that is in the middle kind of represents a little bit the person falling from Sky World into the Earth. So we tried to incorporate as many elements as we could from that. What? I don't think we have a bigger slide. Yeah, sorry, Jason. So yeah, the tile, we can divide the tiles in this logo kind of in 4 themes or categories. Some talking explicitly about the creation story, some talking about the gifts from the creator and Skyworld, so the different plants, and then also many tiles talk about diplomacy. And then we also have tiles that talk about arts and creative practices. And then just to say a few words about the colors. So the Anishinaabe color palette draws from inspiration from the different shades that are found in the wampum shell. Which is a very significant resource for the Haudenosaunee. And then, yeah, the wampum shells derive from the northern carp clam, and the purples are a direct reference to that. And if you're interested, actually, by wampum shells, there's going to be a presentation tomorrow that you can come to and learn more about it. And I'm going to let Kimi talk about the other pod designs.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you. So this is the Herenga Te Mahara pod logo. So this celebrates the creation story for Māori involving Ranginui, Sky Father, and Papatuanuku, our Earth Mother. And this pod logo narrates the emergence of life from darkness when the Ranginui and Papatuanuku were separated, and the beautiful gifts and powers and things that surround our world that were granted to us from the separation. So these tiles acknowledge the story of their separation, as well as Māori community and how we have utilised their gifts to create a thriving and flourishing nation in Aotearoa, and highlighting the different landscapes that represent the different iwi within our country, as well as the different art forms that we practice, and the different atua, so the gods that we are connected to and that we celebrate. So this encompasses, I feel like, Māori and our existence in Aotearoa. And the colours for this pod design were inspired from the natural clays that you find on our shorelines and that we use for a lot of our traditional art practices like tukutuku, weaving, and kowhaiwhai, so our traditional paintings. Yeah, this is our Te Herenga Te Mahara pod design. So if we could go next. So this is the Ka Hawaii Paiaina pod logo for Hawaii. And this pod design was created from the conversations of the pod, which highlighted the importance of representing each individual island. And collectively in Hawaii, there are 137 islands. So the pod decided to focus on the 8 main and most well-known islands in Hawaii, and to reflect the different environments and plants and kind of ecosystems that each one has. So each island has its own spiritual realm, deeply connected to like the identity and lineage. And these islands embody a legacy of resilience, offering both natural beauty and cultural richness that is fundamental and foundational for the Kaina Maoli way of being, so the Indigenous people of Hawaii. And this logo, we wanted to reflect this rich culture of the Kainaka Maoli lineage, and how this logo intertwines cultural elements, symbolism, landscapes, and plants to showcase their pod. And like the Herenga Te Maharanga pod, this colour palette was also inspired by their natural dyes and pigments, but this particular one was pigments from plants that you can find on the island and how they're used for their traditional clothing and art forms. So yeah, if we can go next. I don't know if I'm seeing, but I can see it, but I'll keep going. So this is the Wahambisa pod, and these tiles were made with the help of Suzanne Kite and the Lakota community that she was involved with. And in particular, this pod used the Lakota visual language conventions developed by the Lakota graphic designer Sandy Redwings. And Sadie Redwings, her thesis discusses how Lakota grammar derives from basic shapes like lines, triangles, and squares influenced by porcupine quill work. So our design team, this approach was deeply informed by these visual conventions and utilizing repetition and a combination to create recognizable traditional shapes for the Lakota community. And we are very grateful to have Suzanne kind of navigate us while we try and visualize their vision for their pod design. And yeah, these colors were inspired by the kind of natural dyes of some plants, and as well as Lakota the Lakota regalia, as well as the beadwork. So yeah, this was the Wahambisa pot. And if we can go next. So this is the Nitisapi pod, and this pod design is still in development, and they are embarking on a beautiful process where they're having workshops and conversations with their elders and having their elders in the center of the development of this pod design. And this is run by their cultural liaisons, Serene, and they have given us this tile to represent their pod, which is the Morning Star, which holds great significance to their people and to their identity and their culture. And I think we are all very grateful to be involved in this process where they're having these conversations with their elders to create a pod design that has every individual tile that has a lesson and a meaning and a story behind it for their next generation. And it's going to be used as a learning tool. And we're all very excited to be on this journey with them. And yeah, we understand that things take time and we never want to rush a community. And we believe that it will happen when it happens, and we are here to support them on this journey. So yeah, that is all the pod designs so far.
That's it? Okay, okay, great. So actually, I wanted to throw immediately to the my mic off? Nope. Okay, good, okay. So I actually wanted to give an opportunity immediately to see if there's any questions right now in the audience, because I have lots to say, but I've been saying it for a while. So any questions? Okay, I'll just keep talking then, ask them questions. Can you talk a bit about, I mean, you've already talked a little bit about some of the challenges, but can you talk a little bit about how your sort of individual design trajectories kind of intersected in this project, right? Does that make sense as a question? Kimmy, Renee? Yeah? Okay. So I'm going to put Renee on the spot to answer first.
Thank you, Jason. Yeah, so I kind of came in, I guess 4 years of experience under my belt. So I kind of came in like the older sister in a way, the tuakana. That was mentoring some of these amazing designers that you see in the room. And really just trying to bring, as we do, bring our strengths to the table in order to work effectively as we can being online. So it really helped in, I guess, when it came to defining some of the, or building a consciousness within the team to help us, I guess, work intentionally, as Tarcisio says, with Indigenous communities. Kimi and I have experience working with Māori, we have experience living within Te Ao Māori, so we do understand the different tikanga and the different kawa that we need to have when it comes to speaking with Māori communities. And I think what we wanted to do is really bring a lot of our experiences, a lot of our knowledge to the table in order to help build consciousness into the team and help us work authentically as we can with other Indigenous communities. We're not as experienced as we are working with Indigenous communities in Canada and US, but we wanted to take an approach that fitted, that was culturally grounded, and then learnt off them and how ways that we could work authentically with Indigenous communities. So a lot of the principles that we brought in was built around manaakitanga, or sharing our resources, hosting people, being hospitable to people, many cups of teas, reciprocal relationships. It was all about building relationships first before we started bringing things to them. Because I think if we didn't have a strong foundation before we started the program, we wouldn't be able to have the outcome that we did. And we didn't be able to have these thriving and strong relationships with each other, as well as the Indigenous pods that we worked with. Okay.
I think I can say some few things. Is that I feel like the design that is taught in school, and when you get to like a community of designers and you kind of like talk to each other or like see projects of each other, there's a thing with designers that like they feel they know everything in a sense. They feel like everything needs a redesign, everything's wrong. So it's just like trying to put their own perspectives at all times into all visual things. And I think that was the thing that we really try to detach from the process. It's that thing of like we don't actually need to propose anything. We just see it. We just listen. We learn, and then we kind of like put ourselves as like some sort of facilitators between the design itself and the community and the stories that were shared. So again, it's that thing of like using our work, using our time with intention, and being and build those relationships without being like, you need a redesign, like you need to do this and that. So I think that I think Julia said in the presentation, like that was like one of the main things that we told the pods during like our first meetings, where it's just like, we don't want to do this for you, we don't want to do this with you. So I think that like my personal thing is just like kind of like seeing what designers usually do and trying to see like, how can I approach the design aspect that is in me into that process. And
Kimmy?
I think to add, because when I joined this project, it was my first like international project after leaving university. So I still had quite a few of the university fundamentals in design school that you get taught. And I think one thing was, this project is about abundance and showcasing the beautiful differences and the abundance of different Indigenous cultures, and then bringing that abundance into a logo. Whereas I feel like when we're in universities, we get taught a lot about balance and consistency and making sure everything, looks uniform, whereas this project embraced differences and embraced abundance and embraced like vibrance and different imagery. And I think for me going in, that was something that I had the design fundamentals in my brain when I came into this space, but I kind of left it at the door, allowing the communities to want to have their vision come to life. And us as a design team are kind of just a vessel that allows their vision to come to life. It's kind of like we're working for them, we're making this thing visually that they can start to see and that their communities can start to interact with. So I think for me, that was a very interesting journey, having to navigate embracing a logo that for some people might find like, well, this is a lot happening. But if you kind of understand the meaning and the purpose behind it, you start to understand the importance of representing abundance and the diversities and also similarities between Indigenous people around the world. So yeah.
Great.
What can I add? For me, I came in a little bit later in the process of creating this design. So when I was hired at Aptech, we were starting to talk to the pods. So the whole process of coming up with this idea of weaving and the AI shape, all of that I wasn't really a part of. And I really came in, like some of my first things that I've done at work was actually like sitting in on these these initial meetings with some of the pods. And I think for me, like my approach to it was really like coming in with knowing that I know nothing, because I really didn't know nothing. Like it had been a while since I've done design even, because I did a break while I was doing my BA in art history. And I was new at Aptech, and I was new to this whole project, right? And I don't know much about, like I've learned a lot during this process, but I didn't know much about these communities. So it really was a process of listening. I did a lot of listening and trying to, so Renee compared herself to like a big sister, and I really feel like that's true. Like Renee, Kimiora, and Tarcisio kind of guided the project. I was here to support it. I brought in my illustrator skills, which I do think are quite strong, and then the rest of it was just kind of listening and learning, and feeling very privileged to sit in on all these conversations.
Great. So can you whatever combination you want, talk a bit more about the community consultations, right? I think it might be useful and interesting to this audience to get a bit more of a texture of what that actually looked like. I don't know if somebody wants to jump in on that.
Yeah, I could talk a bit about that. So yeah, I think before we actually started talking to each of these Indigenous pods, we did a bit of work on the interview guide. And basically what this is it's a guide or a prompt to help move the conversation along. But we did know before the conversations even happened that we wanted them to lead the conversation. And I think that's what happens when we go for a lot of these engagements, is that we want them to take the pace that they want to. We're there to listen, we're there to take in the information, we're there to understand and be a hand to hold when it comes to talking about sacred information, sacred knowledge, that is traditional knowledge. At the start, we did all of our introductions in whatever languages that we were comfortable in. We shared a lot about us. We tried to be as reciprocal as we can, because we do understand that this information is sacred, and we just want them to say whatever they want to, and not have to be forced to say anything that they needed to. So our first conversation was with the Haudenosaunee community, and even just to start it off authentically, I asked them, how was the best way to pronounce your pod name? We wanted to be respectful in that instance as well, when it comes to pronunciation, when it comes to acknowledgement, and just respecting the language, the history, and the people that came from that community, and that spread off to our other Indigenous engagements as well. And then when it came within, like throughout the meetings, we were bouncing off stories from our cultures, from their cultures, and just it was a cultural exchange, if I were to say that. It was a rewarding cultural exchange, and we got to listen to the amazing stories that really sustained their community, and we got to share ours. So yeah, it was a beautiful, beautiful experience, and I was just glad to be in the room and to hear the amazing stories that they were just so excited to share with us. So yeah, that's all I'll say.
Okay. Anybody else? Nope. Yep.
Yeah, and there was a lot of emails and Zoom meetings involved. So it wasn't just like, yeah, having this first meeting and listening, and like after a while, we're just like, here it is, it's ready, like, and that was it. We talked to them, and then after that, we did some research based on the things they said, and then we worked a little bit, and then we were like, came back to them and said, hi, this is what we did, and please, we need you to first like say what your first impressions are, but please do bring this to your community, to people that are involved in the research, but in people that are also not involved, and please like get some time and try to work on it, and the things that are right, the things that are like maybe not very much right, and bring it back to us. So I think in the timeline, there's like a bunch of different key points that we said, but it was basically like, I'd say from like March 2024 to up to like November, which was the AGM, that we were like corresponding with the pods, and it was also like super, super sweet that we went to the AGM, and it was like the first time of us meeting us four, but also like the people that we had these conversations, and it was really sweet because like we got a lot of gifts, like small gifts from them, and they were like so happy to see us, as happy as we were to meet them. Yeah, so it's a relationship that we built, and we're still in contact with them, and it's been great. It's been really great so far.
So I want to ask, any questions yet? Okay, more. Actually, I'm going to ask my question, and then we'll go to your question. Okay. So there's a moment that I've found to be particularly. I've been thinking about it ever since. It was very much at the end of the process. I think it might have been even maybe just a month or 2 months before we went to Aotearoa for the general meeting, where one of the challenges for you all was you've done all this work with the pods, developing the individual pod configurations, and then at the same time, you're always working on the global logo, right? And sort of figuring out, okay, what to take from the pod tiles and sort of bring into the global logo, which in any context or any situation would be very challenging because of the number of items that you're working with. But this was complicated even further by the fact that the pods had particular tiles that they wanted to use from their design to represent themselves in the global logo. And there's a couple moments in there, so where it was like, actually, and this goes to the sort of kind of this balance between sort of working with and co-creating with, and also at some point still having to be like, okay, actually, we do have some expertise that we're bringing, and we want to suggest some things that might be different from what you suggested to us first, and what do you think? So a couple of tiles coming up into the global logo, maybe not fitting so well with what was already in the global logo from a sort of an aesthetic sense. And so I think what was really interesting to me was, I think we were prepared to be like, okay, well, that's how it's going to be. But then we thought, okay, maybe let's go back and say, we hear you, we respect what you've said, and we understand why you've said it. here's a challenge that we have in terms of bringing this particular logo or this particular tile into the global logo, and we have a proposal, right? And sort of proposing to them maybe an alternative. And part of the reasons why I found that so fascinating is I think this is kind of the challenge for working with these kind of projects where you're trying to work at both levels at the same time. But also that by the time they got to that question, that the team had built up enough trust with the people they were working with in the pods, that the people that they were working with were willing to take their advice, right? Were willing to sort of follow their direction, which was in a slightly different direction than what they had wanted in the first place. Once they heard about the reasoning for it, why they wanted to make that suggestion, and also because after a year of being in conversation with them, building a relationship, building trust, they were willing to be like, you know what? We can see what you're saying. We understand your challenge, and we want to help you with your challenge, right? And so, yes, we can make some changes in what we think we sort of want to propose for that kind of global tile. So anyways, and you guys can correct me later if I got some of those details wrong, but that's how I remember it. So anyways, so Morgan.
I also work in UX space, mostly in the games industry, and I think I'm Jason's longest serving master's student. I just finished my thesis last fall. So my question is actually building on what Jason said. So what was the moment where you sort of realized, yes, this is it, this works, and people were kind of on board with the final design? I'm just curious if you could talk about that. I guess anyone who has something to say.
Well, I think it was like the final global, because the global logo became the first and the last thing that we did, because we started in this like global idea of like representing a program. Then we went like super into the pod designs, so then we could have a kind of like an answer for the global thing. And honestly, like we went to New Zealand in the 7th of November, and I think the logo was ready in like the days before, because it was a lot of like details, and when it comes to like that complex of design, it's like everything takes a while to to digest and everything. But it took different times actually, because it depended on people's availability to kind of like have us in a meeting to talk about it. So some of the pods were done before the others. Some of them were like looking at one of the first iterations and they're like, this is awesome. There are like 2-3 small details that I needed to see changing, but overall it's really good. Some of them were like, this is great, but this is not what I envisioned for this. So like, let's revisit everything. So I'd say like around October 2024, which was almost a year in, we had kind of like the final answers. Yeah.
Yeah, to add to that, just why we're using quotes, I think, is really important, because this logo might change, like the conversation, especially the conversation that Jason mentioned, like we're still having that conversation. Like it's not, like it's done and it feels final in a way, but at the same time, it's strange because it's the kind of logo that I feel like it's never really gonna feel final, because it might change. Like when we add more pods to the program, then there's gonna be more tiles added and then tiles removed, and then the logo is gonna change again. So there's an element of like constant, I guess, transformation to it. And the conversations that we had before the AGM are still going on now. So it's kind of hard for me to pinpoint like a specific moment to say like, oh, this is it. I do think, like, to just kind of agree with you, like it was very close to the point where we launched the design that we finished it. And also like to add to, in terms of the pod logos, like I do think that that part of the process I really loved was this element of like, when we got the feedback, like for some, as you said, like for some of them, it was like very few things to change. But then for some of them, like we had to change so many things. And in some ways, that was for me like the best part of creating those logos. Like they would have these comments of like, yes, this is the right element, but it's not the right way to show it. Or like, for example, like one of my favorite example is there's a tile with a turtle on it on the Haudenosaunee pod logo. And like the turtle didn't have the right number of panels on it. So we just had to change the number of panels on the turtle, right? And that kind of detail, we had to do that for like so many tiles. So it was a long process also because of that. But yeah, just I feel like for the global logo, it's always gonna be in transformation. And in some ways, it's just never gonna really feel like a final product.
Kimi, Renee?
I can go. I think how I see the global branding, it's kind of like a living thing. I kind of see it. It's like how the program grows and changes and invites new people. Our global logo reflects the program in itself as it grows and meets new people, and then new pods join, and then like identity kind of like expands. And I think that whole thing of it being quite a flowing kind of living thing in itself to reflect how our community that we've made within abundant intelligence is growing and flourishing. So I think, which is kind of strange for it to be like a quote unquote aesthetic logo that is going to be evolving and growing and changing. But I think that this reflects how this research program pushes the boundaries of what is aesthetic thing, what is like we are pushing boundaries. And I think our global branding beautifully reflects what we're trying to do within this program, if that makes sense.
I agree. I do would like to say it was a bit of a slow burn when we first presented it to the team. A lot of people were like, Kimmy and I, Tarcisio, all of us, we fell in love with it in the workshop when we were developing. I'm like, oh my God, these tiles are going to be so cool. We're going to have 5 different sub-brands for each pod. Like, this is going to be amazing. So when it came, like the first presentations, we're like, but it was just, we had to fight for our baby. We were printing it out, we were putting it in people's faces, having those conversations. But I do think when it came after the pod engagements where we talked about the concept, talked about what we were thinking of creating together with each of these pods, we got a lot of positive reactions. We got a lot of excitement from the different Indigenous communities because they could see how they could resonate with it. They could see how they could use this as a tool to help their communities. So I think that was really where I saw like this concept, this movement, enabling just the prosperity of our Indigenous futures. So that's just for me. Yeah.
Excellent, nice. Okay, let's take a question. Vanya there.
Thank you all for such a rich presentation. To keep the conversation going on the global logo, I wanted to ask a little about the side-by-sideness of the tiles, especially beyond aesthetic reasonings. You discussed narrative, flora, fauna, different color palettes, and if any of you could speak more to what it meant to create this global branding and have different elements placed side by side or in a certain orientation, if there was any difficult decisions that were made or exciting moments. Yeah.
That's a great question. I love that question because it was a really cool way and how we like there were many variations to how we placed a lot of these tiles. And I think when we first done some first designs, there was dark backgrounds and there were light backgrounds. And how we utilize them is we flip them just like harakeke or just like ribbon, where you have where you fold the ribbon, and it's like the underside and the overside. So that's how we first thought about placing a lot of these tiles, as there was like the light side, the dark underside, overside, as a way to like bring in that weaving concept. But then what we landed on is because we used this function of multiple colors, we focus more on the content within each tile. And since this comes from the environment, we wanted it to reflect the atmosphere of the environment. So you can see a lot of the tiles at the bottom are connected to the land, to the water, to our earth. And then when you keep coming up throughout the atmosphere, we were looking at our maunga or our mountains, things that live on the land, our plant life, or our art forms. And then when we go higher throughout the logo, we're looking at our sky land, thinking about the sky dome, the celestial tree, the clouds, the moons, the stars. So you can see throughout a lot of these tiles that they all are ordered in that way. Anyone else?
Do we have any other questions?
No? Okay, will be the last question, and then we'll let you guys go.
Wow, amazing. Especially since I've known about the work of these two there. It was very nice to see the whole process. And I wanted to say how I appreciated the humility you expressed, especially as far as the living being that is the logo and the open-endedness of the project. And I wanted to share that because I think it's very refreshing for a big AI project to be enlivened by such humility, humble people. And so I just wondered if you had any thoughts to share about how your process was going to resonate or already influence some of the ongoing projects already within abundant intelligences, specifically like AI project, and how you guys were also influenced by the process of others within the projects too. So any thoughts on this would be amazing. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I'll try to make it really short, but inside the research program, there's 5 research axes. Is that right?
3.
3. Research topics, maybe then I'm talking.
Oh, no, 5. Yes, 5.
Yeah, research topics. Sorry. It's a lot of words. And one of them is storytelling. And I think that's like one of the things that we try to fall under, that umbrella of storytelling. And we're actually like thinking now that the logo is launched, everything's live, we're trying to thinking of like, how can we kind of like use that framework in different projects, in workshops and so. And I think one of the things to me that like I draw inspiration from is the work from a writer from Nigeria. Her name is Chimamanda Adichie. And she did a TED Talk, and it changed my life when I watched it the first time. And I just want to read like just a snippet about what she talks about. She talks about the danger of a single story, which is basically how people, when they see just like a portion of you, or like a very limited vision of a people or a person, it becomes like the whole story that you see about them. And she says that stories matter, and many stories matter, and stories have been used to dispossess and to malign. Yeah, but stories can also be used to empower and to humanize. Stories can break the dignity of a people, but stories can also repair that broken dignity. So I think that's like the core thing for me. yeah, I just wanted to leave it there because it's such a beautiful quote.
Yeah, to add to that question, I think for me, like the greatest thing about this project and this process was collaboration. So the way that we collaborated, we had to find a way to collaborate together, right? Learn how to collaborate together, but then also learn how to collaborate with the different research pods and the different community members that we talked to. And I think in some ways that might be our contribution to abundant intelligences more broadly. So like offering kind of our experience kind of can offer some insight into how can we collaborate with like different communities that are they're not different, you know, they don't necessarily have something to do with each other, and how can they collaborate together? And then also like how can we learn to work together in different places as well, right? So some of us being in Jojage and some of us being in New Zealand. So I think that maybe that's our bigger contribution to the project, especially since like in terms of AI, like I don't think we have, you know, that much collaboration to do like to AI specifically, but I think our process was interesting for the rest of the researchers who are involved in ABINT is really, what we learned through this process of collaboration.
Renee or Kimi?
Yeah, I think when I was thinking about how like the future of abundant intelligences, I think back to one of the ethos that I use within my design style framework. And it goes on the long lines of give a man a fish and it feeds him for a night, teach a man to fish, it feeds their community for the rest of their life. And I think when it comes to a lot of the design solutions that I create, I'm always thinking about how we build autonomy amongst each community, how we enable them to lead and actually take on the work, and it lives beyond us, because it's not about us, it's about building these people up, building these communities up to educate them, to learn from them, to celebrate their strengths and support them when it comes to bringing their communities up in a way that sustains them for the future. So I think when it comes to like our process, we're always trying to support our Indigenous communities and members to lead. And that's going to be a big kaupapa that we want to enable in all of the people that we work with within Abundant Intelligences and within any of our other kaupapa that we have in the future.
And I just want to add to what Renee said. I think a lot of our process also reflected this concept of past, present, and future, and that we wanted to acknowledge the ancestral stories and the sacred stories of all these Indigenous communities, as well as acknowledging our privilege of positioning where we are not representing just ourselves coming into the conversations, we're also representing, well, I view it, we also represent our ancestors coming into this conversation, meeting with these other people's ancestors and having these talks about cultural sharing and everything, and then how that helps us to improve and or add into development of our Indigenous communities in the present to allow our future generations of Indigenous people and non-Indigenous people to collaborate for the future, and how we can shift the way that because of technology and because of AI, we can now actually be able to have more conversations with people across the world at much easier than what our ancestors were able to, and be able to find these shared commonalities and how we can all be on a journey together to improve a future where we are no longer at the back seat in history, but we're now in the middle of these conversations and having a voice as Indigenous people. So I think us having this concept of past, present, and future was quite important for us to just acknowledge everything that has happened, is happening, and that will happen. So yeah.
Excellent. That is a great place to close this out, I think. Can we please thank our panelists? It's been a privilege of mine to work with the four of them over this time period. It's been really amazing to see the ways in which they approached this project, the beauty that they sort of brought to it and then brought out of it, and then the relationships that they built with the communities, with the pods and the other researchers that we were working with. So I want to just personally thank the four of you for completely exceeding my hopes for this project, and giving us something that I think represents the project really well in the world. So this is the end of the day for day one of the IFRC Symposium. So we are going to be back here tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. for one session before lunch, and then we are going to be bringing pizza in for lunch. So join us for pizza lunch. Join us at 11 o'clock, please. But also you can have your lunch with us. And then we have another afternoon tomorrow of amazing panels featuring our students and our faculty members. And then we have the reception at Shift at 5:30. So go have a wonderful evening, and thank you all for joining us.
Thanks, Jason. Just letting everyone joining us online, we'll be closing up the Zoom and live stream now. This conversation remains available, as do the others from today, on our YouTube channel. See you tomorrow.
Well, good. No, it was good. I think I will have notes. But no, in general, it was really great. It was really lovely to see it. Yeah, got me inspired again to sit down and start the process. Giving you guys the skeleton to do a write-up, capture all this, get it out there in the world. And we also need to, I think. You guys can also. You guys can start by making suggestions, but I think Johnson's really the person who knows what is on the population. Get started.